tell you my problems, meditating my silence. But I keep pushing my pen, rotating my stylus. Brokenness feeling like sin, now no breath, low dollar. Used to be left on red, now all the girls go holler. Now all the girls go follow. All the fake fans gon' pile up. I need peace to borrow, get that shit right back tomorrow. Somehow all the fans go bravo. Smile so much to hide my sorrows. Faith is shaky in bravado. I can't hold a frown too long. I can't stay down too long.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Coach Mo Murphy podcast, hosted by yours truly, Coach Mo Murphy. And with me once again for a consecutive, like the fourth or fifth consecutive week in a row, we got Jeff Hunt in the building, which means we're talking none other than college football. Jeff, how are you on this lovely Sunday?
Good. A really good college football Saturday. You said it best in our chat. College football really, this is their time of year. They kind of kick the crap out of the NFL right now. The NFL is just kind of ho-hum, getting through it and everything. As to where college football is making waves, you know, teams are getting upset, coaches are getting fired. Like really interesting, engaging from noon to probably, I think, about 1 a.m. until Florida State's season got even worse. What a great college football Saturday. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And it's nice when my team can have an average day and win, I believe, 34-0, if I remember correct. So good day.
Yeah,
good day.
We'll talk about our Buckeyes here in a little bit. But, I mean, like you said, college football is in the peak of its season. It brought us a coach's firing last weekend, and this is the second consecutive week in a row where a coach at a prominent program has been fired, Jeff.
Ooh.
Not too long before we started recording the show. Billy Napier is officially out as the University of Florida Gators head coach. I think this was inevitable. I think we saw this coming from a mile away, especially early on in the season. I mean, after that USF loss, like, it really got loud. Like, you would be surprised. At best, he probably makes it through the season. You could just kind of tell, like, they were going to start moving on from Billy Napier. And then, like, Florida beats Texas. And now it's like, well, could they be alive? And it's also one of those, like, if you're a Billy Napier, you want him to go, then you're like, man, this dude just never dies. Like, every time we want him to go, he has a big-time victory. You know, ended up beating Texas. And then they ended up winning the game yesterday. Like, you're fired after a win. Now, you won a game that you shouldn't have won. Honestly, Mississippi State should have won that game, but you won nonetheless. And you wake up on Sunday and you have an emergency meeting basically between the coaches and then between the players to announce the news that Billy Napier is no longer going to be the head coach. And they just weren't good. Like, they have all the talent. That defense was that, like, they have all the talent. It wasn't a talent problem. They had a really good defense. It's not like offenses have just gone absolutely crazy and DJ Lagway just wasn't able to get the job done. But, like, you probably say you would see zero development from the time DJ Lagway stepped on campus until now. And he just started getting his footing a couple games, but it's still been inconsistent. You know, you finally got some big time wide receivers that are freshmen. They were young. They've showed some promise. So there's some things to like about this Florida Gators, especially if I'm a head coach considering taking this job, especially if it's an upgrade from wherever I'm currently at. Like, there's some things to like if you could keep that together, but just Billy Napier just wasn't able to get over the hump. And essentially, like, you fired Dan Mullen to hire Billy Napier. Billy Napier's time at Florida was worse than Dan Mullen's. And so now you're looking like, who knows what, maybe Dan Mullen would have been a lot more successful in this point of college football in this point of his career had he stayed in Florida. Like, maybe this is what he needed, was a time of NIL and a 12-team playoff. And that was just what he needed for an opportunity, not just to win the SEC, but be very viable in the SEC, which the Florida Gators were. They were still a pretty good team, always on the outside looking in. So maybe this NIL would have made that jump. You look at the talent, Dan Mullen's probably just as good, if not a slightly better coach than Billy Napier. So you downgraded, went through years, and now you're going to have to possibly start a rebuild. And it's all about who you hire as a head coach, and it's all about who's interested in that job. Like, it could be a rebuild. It could not. It just depends on who takes the job, because if a prominent head coach comes into Florida with NIL, the transfer portal, like, you could load up, and year one could be very easy for a prominent head coach. But if it's one of those guys like a USF head coach, Alex Golesh, the North Texas head coach, if somebody were to come try and get him, like any one of these smaller G5 schools, and I wouldn't say smaller, they're bigger of the G5 schools, but any of these G5 school coaches looking for a P5 job, if Florida gives them that opportunity, I think, this is a 2 to 3 year rebuild in a sense to try and bring in that talent as opposed to some of the hotter names, the Lane Kiffin. Some people even think of James Franklin. And I'm like, boy, do you just want to go from Dan Mullen to Billy Napier to James Franklin? James Franklin is a better head coach than Billy Napier, but you're essentially signing up for the same thing. He never won any of the big ones. And the difference, I guess, in the SEC and the Big Ten throughout his time is there's going to be a lot more big ones in the SEC than there were in the Big Ten. It's not just Ohio State and Michigan. And he was starting to enter that level with Oregon now being in there anyways. Was like, it's not just Ohio State and Michigan. So now you're talking about 3 or 4 loss type of coach if you can't win any of the big ones. And so that'll be like your ceiling in the SEC if James Franklin doesn't take over if he was to take over the program. So I don't know what Florida should do. I go after the big fish first and make them tell me no.
Well, that's interesting you brought up Penn State because Florida and Penn State have the same trouble. They're kind of rating their program versus ghost. Florida suffers from, we know what it looked like under Urban Meyer, the absolute best, program in the nation for, 5 years and all these things. And then they took a step back when they got rid of him, which, most teams do. And now they're like, well, I don't understand why we're not great. And I get it. There's nothing wrong with having expectations. Everybody knows that. But I don't know what the realistic expectations are. Just like Penn State, I don't know what the ceiling for the program is in today's NIL. I would not pretend to know the inner workings of Florida, football and recruiting and all that. But what I do know is whoever goes there has to compete against 2 or 3 other really good programs in their state, alone. That's always been a trouble. They're trying to grab guys out of, I assume, Alabama, Georgia, like anybody else is going to. But now you're competing with the entire country, especially what we think is an even playing field recruiting wise with Ohio State now, with Oregon now, with Michigan now. So now that's pulling out of the recruiting pool. So now it's more even than ever. So like you don't have the advantage of the label on the side of your helmet. You don't have the advantage of location anymore. You don't have the advantage of coaching staff anymore. This is a ground up. I don't think there's a foundation here for a guy just to step in and take. This isn't a take him to the next level situation, just like Penn State. Whoever goes there is starting from scratch. And that can be done. We're seeing what's happening up in Indiana. We'll see how that turns out, but it can be done. But this isn't we need somebody to get us over the hump. I think you go backwards because I can't see the whole team staying there. Not that they're very talented, but I would imagine they'll get picked apart in the transfer portal unless they take a big swing right now and get somebody in there, before the bowl season. So I understand that's why you fire the coach early. We talked about this with Franklin like 5 days ago. Fire him early so you can start talking to whoever you have in mind, start talking to them. If it's not going to be Urban Meyer, but I'm just saying if there's a guy like that sitting, in a TV studio somewhere, now's the time to get him in there because if that transfer portal opens and you've got, a first-time coach, if you've got another Billy Napier and all this, like it's going to be bad because now kids realize like if I'm on this team and I'm a really good player, let's say one of the players on defense, I know that if I go to Indiana, next year, I'm competing to go to the playoffs. I know that. So there's no reason for me to wait out the unknown. And I think that's the biggest problem you have with a hire right now is why would a guy that's good enough to be on any team in the country wait out the unknown and see what's going to happen? There is no rebuild anymore. So I don't know what the answer is for these schools that are in this. And we're going to see it again. We assume with Florida State, we're going to have this exact same conversation with Florida State. And they're going to, it's going to cost them a lot more money to do it. So I think this is terrible for the state of Florida's program.
Yeah, 100%. And even Miami losing, and we'll talk about that here in a second. I do, when it comes to the Florida.
Feels like that happened last week. It
really does. It's been so because it happened Friday night and so much happened within the past 24 hours starting on Saturday, with the first slate of games that we'll talk about here in a second. But the one name I want to talk about is Lane Kiffin. That's the name that gets thrown around. It got thrown around for the Alabama job. Florida, of course, that would be a dream hire for any Florida Gators fan, any Florida Gators alum, anybody invested into the football program. That's a dream hire. In my opinion, if I'm Lane Kiffin, I wouldn't leave Ole Miss to go to Florida. I'm not sure. Like, I know the University of Florida, they have a lot of alum, they have a lot of money, and they have people really want to see that program be prominent. But at what cost, I don't know. Lane kind of knows what he has at Ole Miss right now. And the more he wins, the more he gets opportunities, the more money they're going to pour into it. But like, it seems to me that he has a great situation at Ole Miss right now. And why would I leave to basically, I'm not saying, I don't think Florida is a downgrade, but I think it's just a lateral move. And so I don't think Lane is in the business of lateral moves. And I tell people, like, think about it. If he was really into leaving Mississippi, like, he would have left and took that Alabama job when they called. Like, they were very interested. It made a lot of sense to a lot of people. He would have took that job, but he didn't. And so I think if he was to ever leave Ole Miss, and I'm not sure that he will for the foreseeable future, but if he were to leave, I think it'd be a destination spot. I don't even know if it'd be all about necessarily program upgrade as opposed to somewhere that he would kind of want to plan on riding off to. Not that Lane's old. He has plenty of time, but I don't see him leaving Ole Miss in the foreseeable future. And I think a prime opening would be somewhere where he would want to live for the long haul. Like, I think his next move would still be, and so I think it would be like location based as opposed to program based, because there's not a lot of programs that are better than Ole Miss that's going to be looking for a head coach.
Honestly,
anybody better than Ole Miss isn't necessarily. Their coach isn't on the hot seat right now.
Well,
any job that would be better than Ole Miss, the coach isn't on the hot seat.
That and Kiffin isn't that good. He's a really good football coach. He's a good program runner. I think he's in a great spot. He's already been through this of going and being a disaster. We saw what happened at Tennessee, and I know he's a different coach and a different person now, and after everything he's been through, but I'm saying he knows the other side of this. He knows what it's like to go and fail. And if he goes and it doesn't go, I won't even say he fails. It might not be his fault. If he goes and it doesn't go right, he might be done. Now, why would you leave a great job that he has? He's entrenched down there. They love him. Expectations aren't too high yet. Like, he's got what, 2 more seasons to miss the playoffs before it even starts getting hot down there. Honestly, because he's taken them to a really, high level of football. And plus, now you got to have these relationships. You got to have a coach that's able to go to whoever your guys are, or guys or girls are with the money. You've got to be able to go to them in the offseason and say, yo, I got this running back coming out of, Tennessee State North University. If we come up with 500,000, like, he's in. Like, you've got to be able to do that, as to where when you go to a new school, now you've got to build these relationships. You got to build the trust. Why would somebody want to do that? To me, as far as the Kiffin conversation, which I don't think we're going to have this year, probably next year, in a couple of years, I think his next step is the NFL. I feel like he's an NFL coach, and I think it'll work next time and all this. But like you said, why would you make a lateral move to a school? You got the same schedule. Like, you got the same player pool. I don't know anything about facilities. There could be a difference there. I'm sure Urban Meyer left them, in pretty good situation as far as facilities and all that go. But I'm not saying Lane might succeed there, but I don't know what's better. He's just going to bring his team with him. It's going to be the same team. Like, why would you do that? Maybe, if I'm Lane Kiffin, I spin this into a raise at Ole Miss. That's what I do.
Yeah. And I mean, my thing is, like, people see University of Florida, but like, Gainesville isn't that much better than where he's at in Mississippi. Like, it's really not. It's the same type of town, just located in 2 different states, but nothing about him going to Florida, which is probably, more so Gators fans' pipe dream as opposed to a realistic option. But nothing to me screams like that's a better move for him. Like, I think where he's at, like you said, everything about him and his bounce back has been like, from what he did at FAU and then get a prominent job at Ole Miss. And like, this is part of his bounce back. It's and like, perfect. He's still in good graces, and you still continue to build more relationships where your options will be open around the country, and just continue to let people embrace you for the bounce back that you are, staying on the straight and narrow. You don't have to go over there, because the minute you look like you're heading towards failure, whether it's your fault or not, everything from your past is going to get brought up, and it's going to hurt you at your future opportunity, as opposed to, what you have here at Ole Miss. I think he loves it. I think his family loves it. And I think that really matters, especially at this stage of his career. I don't think Lane has much interest of leaving Ole Miss for any other opportunity, unless it was the NFL, or it just had to be like this is a no-brainer. I have to take this job. And I don't think any one of those jobs will be open.
And that's another thing about the 12-team playoff that we love. You can't just go handpick your coaches anymore because you can succeed anywhere now. You really can. Like USF is going to make the playoffs this year, more than likely. Florida is not. So only one of those teams is going to have a chance to play. So you can't just go. You can't go to the we'll say the fourth best team in the Big Ten and go, hey, you might as well come to Florida. You got no chance where you're. Okay, let's put it this way. Urban Meyer left a undefeated Utah team to go to Florida, and that made so much sense then. You wouldn't have to do that now. Urban Meyer could compete for a national championship at Utah right now. So why would he go to Florida? So it's just things like that to factor in. I honestly don't even have a clue who Florida's looking at or Penn State. I'm sure it's all the same pool of characters, but it's easy to rebuild now. It's quicker. I'll put it this way, quicker to rebuild. It ain't easier because all them players are like they can leave, and that's a big used to be nobody
to rebuild, left. But you can't. You may not be like I might turn around, rebuild, take the job, and I might win 10 games, but I got a bunch of juniors, a bunch of seniors, a bunch of NFL ready guys, and they all leave. And so if I'm not a portal king and consistently attacking the portal and having that veteran guys while attacking recruiting and building for the future, and I don't have them all ready to meet in the middle at the same time, it can be very up and down, a la Mike Norvell at Florida State. Like that's the prime example of what it can look like if you're trying to attack the portal. Yes. Florida State came out and beat Alabama after being a 2-win team last year, and everything looked up. Like it was we're down on Alabama. This could be Florida State, especially when we looked at how weak the ACC is. And the ACC is even weaker than we thought it would be. And the teams that are viable are not the teams that we predicted, before the season started. And you're not even able to handle that. So I don't know what Florida does. And like you said, I don't know what Penn State does. And Penn State just having like their season seems pretty dead, but who knows? Somehow, some way it'll be alive after their bye week.
And
Ohio State. So,
and right before we move on, I just want to touch on what you just said. This is my prediction to see what Kirk Cignetti does once this squad starts moving out. Can you keep up with recruiting? Can you keep that level of players coming in? Can you rob the portal? Because my guess is no. But you just nailed it with that. That's the key. Is like it's almost easier when you bring your team with you than the next. Now you don't have those relationships, JMU. You don't now you're competing against the big dogs on the block for players in Bloomington, Indiana. So it's going to be interesting. I'm not saying he can't do it, but I'm saying it's not easy. And we're seeing Ryan Day kind of push through that a little bit. And he's done we've talked about, he's done the best job in the modern era. Alabama's doing a pretty good job. They kind of survived the transition. But look, listen to the brands we're talking about that are able to survive this. It's going to be interesting to see if these upstart coaches that build programs based on loyalty and age, can that translate? It's going to be, we won't know for a couple years, but that's a great point.
And so leading up before Ohio State's kickoff, there were some games being played and we talk about coaches being fired and Billy Napier, like we're in the same conference. There might be a coach on the hot seat. People in LSU, people in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, are starting to grow tired of Brian Kelly because he is what he is. Now, here's my thing, Jeff.
Okay.
Here's my thing that I'm starting to come to the conclusion to is I know we always say the grass isn't greener on the other side, and a lot of times it's not. But, Jeff, maybe, just maybe, there's only 3 to 4 coaches that we should be looking at that are considered over the hump type of coaches.
Okay.
And I'm saying that as in until you do it, everybody else is closer to James Franklin, not Billy Napier, but they're closer to James Franklin, Brian Kelly, Marcus Freeman. That tier is a lot more loaded than pretty much Ryan Day, Dan Lanning, and that's still kind of in question, but Dan Lanning, Kirby Smart. And then you're really talking about when we talk about coaches that I'm looking to get over the hump. There's not a lot of those guys. So when we're looking at Brian Kelly, the best he can do is 10-2 and 9-3. That might be the new above average standard. We're just so used to you having to be 12-0 or 11-1 to be viable for a 14 playoff spot. Where, Jeff, remember just last week, I said this might be the first time not only do we see a 3-loss playoff team in, we could see multiple. because the SEC is beating each other up. The Big Ten could toss each other around a little bit. You have multiple 2-loss teams in there as well, but I'm looking at the 3-loss teams will probably come out of the SEC. But more so, these coaches, the tier 2 type of coaches is a huge pool of coaches where if you give them all the same resources, the same level of playing field, they'll give you close to the same result. It may be one year they'll pop, but more often than not, they'll get you closer to that 10-2 and 9-3 than they will be 11-1, 12-0, and consistently playing in that Final Four or playing for the national championship, because this is what everybody is, and this is what you're pushing out everybody. Had Billy Napier been Brian Kelly or James Franklin at Florida, he still has his job. Like, so that standard is really good enough for everywhere else. Like, if he does what James Franklin did the past 12 years at Penn State, if he's doing that with Florida, he still has his job right now. Does he be in different type of conversation? We need him to finally get over the hump? Sure. But like Penn State went to the Final Four, that would have been good enough. Billy Napier was an under 500 coach at this point and losing a program, losing a lot of players while having the talented roster, no excuses. I just think more so when we go to fire a Brian Kelly or a James Franklin or a Lane Kiffin, that tier of coaches, it doesn't really get better. You just kind of play ring around the rosy with the pieces of, let me take that coach to see if he can do it here as opposed to doing it over there.
Well, I think the biggest thing that on the Brian Kelly side of this, and we're starting to hear some rumblings about Franklin. We don't know if they're going to be true about the, how people felt about him, off the field or whatever. We do not know if that's going to be true. Some of the whispers about maybe how he talked to some recruits and how, that's probably not all true. But what we know about Kelly is I think we can all agree he's not that likable. He's always passing the blame. And so now what he's done is I'm sure he has a pretty you better put up or shut up, relationship with the boosters. He doesn't feel like a guy that's really entrenched in that program. He doesn't feel like an LSU guy, and that shouldn't matter. That doesn't have to matter to the players. It doesn't have to matter to anybody. It doesn't have to matter to the fans. It sure has to matter to the people writing the checks. And that's where I think that when we talk about Brian Kelly, you've got he's going and saying, give me this much money. I can keep this quarterback. He's going to the NFL. And now you're not playing great. And all the things that on the field, the things that LSU is supposed to be really good at this year haven't really, like their offense hasn't taken off. Their defense has been really good, but then they got kind of chewed. Honestly, I watched a lot of that game yesterday. They made a lot of mistakes on defense. They didn't have to. They made Pavia look like, Tim Tebow and all this stuff. And that's fine if you do that. But if you do that and we don't think you're that likable and you're always passing blame and you're just a bad look sometimes on the field, I think that's where if you make like you say, a lateral change to one of these other coaches, like if you switch Brian Kelly and Marcus Freeman, their two teams are in the opposite situation. LSU is better, Notre Dame's worse, is what I'm saying. I think that's the difference, is personality, how you handle all this other stuff. Kelly has this arrogance about him that you just pointed out. He hasn't earned it. He has not got over the hump. And then now he's in another situation to where 5 weeks ago, ridiculously, we were talking about them guaranteed number one team in the nation. And now we're like, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. And they don't look like a team with, again, it's LSU wasting talent again. I mean, we just see this kind of year after year with like littered across the NFL, and yet just not a lot to show for in the postseason. I think Ryan Kelly's a big problem. I don't think his style of personality and coaching, that's a guy that I don't think translates to modern football. He might need to go. I don't know where he needs to go to coach. I'm not even sure he's that good of a coach. I'll be honest with you. I'm saying Orgeron didn't coach and won a national title. Kelly seems like he almost makes his teams worse. And I said it when he left Cincinnati. I said it when he left Notre Dame. He's a guy that keeps, he's getting all the credit for potential, but like we haven't seen it. Come on, you can't. And if not, I don't care how good Vanderbilt is. I don't care what anybody thinks of him. LSU with this team and this quarterback and that defense cannot go lose in Nashville, Tennessee. Cannot.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't disagree with you. And on the other side, like, and you real quick, because you said that, like, that's what my homeboy said. He's a big time LSU fan. And he said, he was like, bro, I don't care about losing. And it's cool that Vanderbilt is ranked and all that, but like, it's still Vanderbilt. He's like, that's like a volleyball school or something, a soccer school or something. He's like, that is not a football school. Like LSU is not supposed to go to Vanderbilt and lose no matter what type of year it is for them, because he's like, you're going to turn around. They're not going to win the national championship. So we didn't lose to some strike of the year national championship type team in Vanderbilt. Like we lost to a Vanderbilt team that just lost the previous week. Like, so they were beatable. So they weren't all everything they were hyped up to be with a big time win. They were just undefeated at the time. Yep. And then they lost the game. And so you would have thought they looked vulnerable. Like, okay, LSU, if they're as good as everybody tells us, then they should go to Nashville and win this game. Like, I thought LSU being an underdog was the easiest, like on the betting tip. I thought that was the easiest money line of the day, Jeff. I'm going to be honest. There were two games at that time. The fact you walked in and Georgia Tech and LSU were underdogs, while I thought both were the better teams. I was like, you put those two together and you might, get your wife something nice for Christmas, because those were the two easiest, like, to me, because of everything. Like, it's still Vanderbilt and this is LSU. And at the end of the day, like, I just trust the brand versus brand. The helmet sticker. I trusted the helmet sticker.
Exactly.
Right. Brian Kelly doesn't match the helmet sticker.
Yeah. And before we move on, I know we got to move on from LSU because let me tell you why they're irrelevant. The schedule: Texas A&M, Alabama, Arkansas, who might get them, Western Kentucky. Okay. And then they finish the season with Oklahoma. So, like, let's just go ahead and put LSU to bed. And they're only a factor if they can upset somebody the rest of the season, in my opinion.
Yeah, and on the other side, like, this is Jeff. We say this every week. I allude to this every week. Another reason, Jeff, why the 12-team playoff in NIL was the best thing ever for college football, because two games were played at that time. We talked about LSU on one side. Vanderbilt on the other side was the winner of that. Jeff, they're in the top 10. Vanderbilt is a top 10 team. And another game was being played at the same time, Georgia Tech and Duke. Jeff, Georgia Tech is now a top 10 team. Georgia Tech and Vanderbilt are top 10 after week 8 of college football in 2025. But people didn't trust that the NIL and the 12-team playoff would spread this talent around where things like this could be possible. While these Clemsons and these Dabo Sweeneys with all this talent are around here losing because the level of talent is no longer lopsided. Clemson is not now more talented than everybody else in the ACC. Ohio State is not now more talented than everybody else in the Big Ten. They felt it last year. It's not like when they won the national championship, they went undefeated. They didn't play in the Big Ten championship. It had 2 Big Ten losses to one team that they ended up smoking later. And the other team, USA, is just a mental thing because they were more talented. But the level, you don't have your 4th best guy is not better than a starter at the 10th best team in your conference anymore. Like, your 4th best guy is probably your 4th best guy. Like, he wouldn't be a starter everywhere else because these guys are getting spread around. Your depth chart, an injury can change the trajectory of a defense, of an offense. You no longer have 5 different quarterbacks because you've recruited them over all these years, and it just makes sense for them to wait their turn at Alabama, at Ohio State, than it does to go somewhere else because I'm trying to compete and play on that big stage. All of that is out the window, and now Vanderbilt and Georgia Tech pulling one out and being able to beat Duke are now both in the top 10. I think that is a huge deal. And like Texas A&M, number 3, finally being able to be that team to get over their hump based on preseason expectations. They are now undefeated at this point in the season. So they have gotten over, they're where we thought Texas A&M should be based on NIL and 12-team playoff. Like, this should benefit a team like Texas A&M, who was always on the outside looking in, but had all the talent in the world. You're like, now that it expands, it's going to make a lot more sense for Texas A&M to be successful. And now look at them. Texas Tech has all the talent in the world and looks like they're going to run away with their conference, and then they're able to get upset because even with all that talent, they're just not more talented than everybody. And Arizona State was able to upset them. Like, that's what the NIL and that's what the 12, especially the 12-team playoff specifically, because you could start paying these players and all these guys would still commit. I'll go to Ohio State for $900,000 and sit the bench before I go because it's still a 14 playoff and I'm still trying to play in that environment, that atmosphere year in and year out. But now a 12-team playoff, 12 different teams have an opportunity to win the national championship. And all you got to do is just get in. And it's turning into, there's a possibility where we might no longer have dominant teams year in and year out. And it really might be all you got to do is just get in, and it start to become a sport where anything can happen in the college football playoff.
Yeah. And just real quick on Georgia Tech before we move on from then. They have Syracuse, North Carolina State, Boston College, and Pittsburgh left in the ACC. They're undefeated in it. They have a great. I've almost got them locked into the playoffs. So far in locked into the playoffs. I've only got Notre Dame and Indiana. Georgia Tech is really close to being locked in, but I'm going to give them the opportunity to get upset because I'm not worried about that Georgia game at the end of the season. The Georgia Tech might not even play that game, and I'm being totally serious. I don't think there's going to be a reason for Georgia Tech to even go out there and get beat up in that game, or Georgia. So that's going to be something we're going to talk about in like week 10 or so, about these teams going, why would I do that? So that's something, just a real quick prediction, that's going to go away. End of the season rivalry games, done. Because there is no reason to go out there and risk your quarterback for nothing. So that's coming. But yeah, Georgia Tech, they're probably going to be in. And on Pavia, real quick before we move on, he might change the way that some of these kids look at, like, man, you can go anywhere and be a star. I may not worry about going to Ohio, like you said, going to Ohio State or Alabama. I may go to wherever, Iowa. I may go to Iowa and just try to be a superstar, man. Diego Pavia got College Game Day to Vanderbilt. Like, that's amazing. And won. And told everybody he was going to win and won. I mean, do I find the story irritating and all that? I sure do. Do I take any credit away from him? I sure don't. So that stuff like that changes the face of college football.
And you know who else sees that, Jeff? All these other donors at all these other programs see that. Like, okay, money could change a lot of things. Moxie could change a lot of things. Just having the right guy at the helm could change a lot of things. And so they'll invest into the program to create a superstar. Yes. Especially when you be like,
you can buy a superstar.
Exactly. And if you're a consistent 12-team playoff type of team, those at the top, the Georgias, Ohio States, they're always going to have investment in the program because y'all are right there. But it's going to increase in those 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, like that 13 through 20. Those type of programs are now going to invest because we might just literally be one or two players away from being a top 12 team and being in that playoff year in and year out. And now you're going to have, instead of 7-8 programs battling for 4 spots, you're going to have 25 to 32 programs battling for 12 spots. Yep. And I think no more than 16. Like, if we expand it one more time, I think 16 is the max. I'm good with 12. 16, I think, will be perfect. But let's not turn this into, I know there's 100 and something universities, but let's just be honest, in the grand national scheme of things, you got to treat it like it's just the Power 5, essentially, in a couple G5 schools that matter when we're talking about putting a playoff together. I think 16 spots, it's no more than that. That's pretty much what all the professional leagues, everybody in the playoffs has about 16 teams in there. I don't think we need more than that.
It's going to be a bigger conversation that we won't have tonight, but it's going to be whatever TV wants to do. That's the bottom line here. It's whatever TV thinks.
I just think there is a world of, like, there's just too many teams in the playoffs.
Yeah, but if TV doesn't care if they think they can make money, they really don't.
Right. Like, and I'm just like, because it like, still making the playoffs has to mean something. Like 16, if you're one of the top 16 teams in the country, you're a pretty damn good team. We get to 24, we get to 32.
It won't go past that.
Football isn't like basketball to me. Like, if you start to try and expand it like that, and it's like, oh, it's not like basketball where really on any given Tuesday, the more you start to add, the more lopsided it starts to get, especially the way.
Well, I think we'll have a different league before we get to that point. We've talked about that. Speaking of buying players, like, to your point, I just want to point out there that you're exactly right. Look at the quarterbacks running college football this year. It's Beck, who got bought. It's Pavia, who got bought. It's Bryce Underwood, Michigan, buying a quarterback, which I should say, I don't mean to say buying. That sounds terrible. Paying money to get a quarterback has saved their program. Michigan has a viable playoff contending team this year, whether we like it or not, because they spent the money. That guy should be at LSU. And Brian Kelly's job is safe if he gets Underwood, but he doesn't. That's the difference now in college football, is just like you said, you can save your program with dollars. And I have no problem with that, because Ohio State did it last year. I mean, it's not like we didn't pay our, Judkins wasn't free. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it was totally worked out. So, but I mean, just to your point, like, to me, like we talked, wrapping around the Napier, that's the key, is those players rather than the coach. Mm-hmm. So it's all about get a coach that lets get the money spent. That's the secret to college football as we speak.
Right, 100%. And then speaking of our Buckeyes, I think you're a lot more harsh on the Buckeyes than me. I think it was a good, sound victory. Like that's what it was. Julian Sand looked really well. His ball placement on some throws looked really well.
Yes.
I know there was some, maybe some decisions you didn't like, sure, but Julian Sand it played really well. Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate being able to play like. There's some things I didn't like on the defensive end. The fact that we held Wisconsin to 0. I understand like Wisconsin has all these injuries and this, that, and the other. But like, if you're a good defense, then you will hold Wisconsin to nothing. Like, especially after what you just saw Iowa do to them. I think they won 37-3. The expectation, at least on the defensive side of the ball, was Wisconsin wasn't going to see too many, if any, opportunities to score, which they didn't. So you have to love to see that from that side of the ball from Ohio State. Not too many big plays given, if really any that you would consider a big time play. I don't think Wisconsin had any really big time plays. Probably only a couple that were worth 10 yards. They didn't have very many first downs. Like it was a great performance on the defensive side of the ball. I think it was a very safe play calling type of day. Maybe that's just good. That's just who Brian Hartline is. But I also get the point as far as I'm still with the benefit of the doubt, not necessarily on Hartline, just on this offense that until we have to, maybe the full focus is on the Michigan game, and that's when he's going to release everything, and that's when Ryan Day is going to let all of his frustrations out. And maybe now that Penn State doesn't
just like he did last year, he got the same game plan as last year.
And I'm not sure if maybe this is just who Brian Hartline is, and it'll be simple and safe, and we just plan on being dominant on the defensive side of the ball. Because my thing is this. I don't blame him for being that way, especially first year as an offensive coordinator. If that's what's going to win me games and I have a national championship level defense, I have the best defense in the country. This defense might could win me a national championship on its back. So why take chances as first year as an OC? I don't think he's really trying out for head coach jobs. I don't think that's what he got hired as the offensive coordinator for, to be, immediately go somewhere for a head coach. So I think that it takes time. And I think to expect Brian Hartline to be this elite offensive coordinator as first year, to me, just isn't fair, only because the one thing that he does do, as I said, the one thing that Ohio State we know can do. You could call the simplest of game plans and it still just get your playmakers the ball. And that's what happens. We get Carnell Tate, we get Jeremiah Smith the ball, and there hasn't been anybody in the country that can stop them yet. So why refrain from it to satisfy a part of the fans that desire to see more when you're still the number one team in the country, you're undefeated, and you're playing you're still playing some of the best consistent football. You're playing more consistently greater than anybody else in the country right now.
Because I live in Ohio right now, and I don't know, like if you had to walk outside and play a football game right now, almost everything they did yesterday would be nullified because it is windy, it is rainy, it is miserable. And this feels exactly like 2023. The CJ Stroud team, to where it is built to play in a dome. And as long as the conditions are perfect and we're on turf, yes, I agree with you. If we play, every game on turf or in a dome, I think this team's really good. What I don't see is explosion in the running game. I don't think they're developing a running back, and that's what scared me. We do not have a starting running back right now. I don't care what anybody says about Bo Jackson. He makes 2 or 3 plays that look good. Nah. You know the difference. Like if you watch some of these running backs in some of these other schools and you're like, oh, that's the difference. It's what happens when you get to the linebackers. We ain't doing much. And that's what worries me, because if I'm every other team, especially the one that we're thinking about at the end of the year, I'm like, I got this. Like I'm going to make that kid throw his ass off. And let me tell you, if it's cold and windy in Ann Arbor that day, they're in trouble. I'm telling you, as this offense stands, they're in trouble because I don't know if they've got that nastiness switch that they can flip. Maybe the defense holds them to 0 and it's not going to matter. We're going to kick a field goal and win it. But I just need to see a commitment to some more. They've got the plays in the running game, but you've got to exercise them. You're running out of time for this. Like, any minute now. No, you're going to have to run the plays. I just want to see them, whether they need to or not, run a 2-minute offense. I just need to see it. I don't care if it's in the middle of the third quarter. I need to see it. I need to see that you can speed it up and you can get plays in quick, because I don't want you to be down 3 to Penn State. And now's when you think you're going to, your first year starting quarterback is going to take it up a notch and be ready. I just that's the downsides I would say. The other side, they do look good. Their athletes look good. They're executing. They're everything that everybody sees. I see. I'm not saying they shouldn't be ranked number one or anything, but I know what's coming. Now, if you tell me, that it's going to be 80 degrees in the in the Great Lakes region the rest of the year, and it's going to look like it did yesterday in Wisconsin, I got no worries. But it's not. And I just like I keep telling you guys, I haven't seen him in a fist fight yet, and I don't want him to get I don't want him to get sucker punched and can't recover like they did last year. Here's what I would say. We've already seen this team do what we're worried about them doing. We saw it a year ago. It's not like it's been 5 years ago we're worried about it. We're not talking about the Purdue upset. We're not talking about the Iowa upset. We're talking about Michigan came to their house and kicked them in the teeth less than a year ago. So, I think it's crazy to act like, Hartline's got a bunch of stuff up his sleeve and he knows what's up. Because I know what that other team's made of. I know exactly what they're going to do. I know how they're going to do it. And we'll see how it matches up.
Yeah, and I understand that. And I also think, if the weather's not on Ohio State's side in that Michigan game and they still are able to get it done, like everything else that you said about this, like the 2023 team where they're built to play in a dome, like the way it's lining up and the way that they see the trajectory, that's going to be where they're going to play. Nice, beautiful weather or in a dome in order to play for a national championship. They're looking at Penn State. I'm not saying they're looking past Penn State. I think
they are right now. I can tell you they are, and that worries me.
I think the best thing for Ohio State is to have a bye week before playing Penn State. I think to have a reset, a recover, get ready for the second part of the rest of the season, and then go ahead and take it out on Penn State and remember what the mission is. I think it's perfect that there isn't some game where we're going to beat the crap out of somebody and then expect to do that against Penn State and look ahead because everything's all about Michigan at that point. I think it's a perfect reset at this point in the season for Ohio State to have a bye week. I think they're going to come out and handle business against Penn State. Would I be a little more worried with this team's season seeming dead? Sure, I'd be more worried if we were playing in Happy Valley and they were trying to be like, this is our Super Bowl and all that. But for Penn State to be dead and come into Columbus, Jeff, for me, honestly, if I'm worried about that type of game, then Ohio State to me is not the national championship contender that I think they are. I think this team is coming for the goal of being, I think Ryan Day, I said this earlier, he's coming for it all. Undefeated, beat Michigan, undefeated, Big Ten champions, national champions. I think he's trying to do it what he would consider the right way, the undisputed way. You can't question anything about my run of winning a national championship. And I think he's always trying to keep the main thing each week. And as long as they come out of there victorious and not really looking like they struggled, then it's a win for them marching on. It's a green check. It's a W in the win column, and we go on and we march on. We're going into this bye week. I just think this Ohio State team, like you said, that maybe they aren't built to, if it's snowing and it's 30 degrees and the wind is going everywhere, to beat Michigan. But if they can pull that game out, they'll be heading into the Big Ten championship. They'll be playing in a dome in Indianapolis. They'll be and then they win that. They'll have a bye week. And at that point, it won't matter because there won't be campus games. It'll be at the bowls. And we know where those bowls are. They're either in the greatest of weather, like Phoenix or Tempe, Arizona, or they're in a dome, or they send you to sunny California where that everything benefits Ohio State in that situation. And I think if that 2023 team was fully healthy throughout the run, had Jackson Smith and Jigba came back and Marvin Harrison Jr. never came out, it was set up for Ohio State to beat Georgia and win the national championship because they were that type of team to play in a dome. They got in a track meet against Georgia, and then you would assume the winner of that game, once TCU had beat Michigan, you kind of painted the winner of the Georgia-Ohio State game will go on to win the national championship. And so it was set up for them. I think it's still set up. You just have to squeak one out in Ann Arbor if the conditions aren't right. It could be 50 degrees, sunny, and an amazing day in November, post Thanksgiving for Ohio State and everything, and then everything is everything, and they're able to light up.
I just worry, and it's not Ohio State's fault. There's nothing they can do about it. I see these other teams just, getting beat. I see what Georgia's been through. Like, Georgia's ready. Like Georgia is ready for the playoffs tomorrow because of what they've been through. Alabama's certainly ready after the last 4 games. Like these teams, and it's not Ohio State's fault that they're mauling teams. It's not their fault that Wisconsin's just awful. I mean, just an awful football program right now. Fickle is obviously thrown in the towel and ready to go and all these things. Yeah, I'm just saying those are just my concerns. I'm not saying they're not a good team or don't even deserve number 1, but I'm saying just I see the weaknesses is what I see. And you're right. If they take care of that against Penn State and look rough, and we saw them do it a year ago too. We saw them turn it on and become the toughest team in football. And if that's the case, I do think I'll just say it. I think promoting Hartline was a mistake. I don't think he's ready for this. And I don't think Ohio State is a place where you should grow as a play caller. I think it's a place where you ought to perfect it and ought to be at the top of your game. It feels more like when they hired Knowles and he wasn't ready for the job and it cost us at least 1 national championship and probably a couple Michigan victories. I hope I'm wrong, but that's what it feels like. It feels like I could call plays for the best players in the country. Some of the red zone stuff they're doing is pretty cool. There is some stuff that, I've seen, but there's no flow to it. Again, everybody, all the people, all the anti-Jeffs out there keep telling me, don't worry about how slow it is. And I'm like, well, why is most of the fan base worried about the pace of the game and worried about cadence and all these things? Just because you love the team and want to defend them no matter what, like we all can't be wrong on what we're seeing. And so they need to, they need to get it in gear and they need to become a buzzsaw. And maybe it's going to be Penn State. If they come out and they just hand it and, the first 15 minutes are up by 28, I'm done. They did this against Michigan State. Remember, I think it's about 3 years ago. We were like, ooh.
They were up 42-0 at half.
Well, and they did it. They also did it with McCord. You're right, both of those. And that was when I was like, okay, Stroud's okay. That was the year that I'm like, okay, I feel better now. We do have another gear. So I want to be wrong. We're going to see what's happening because I really think, as dead as Penn State is, just individual players are going to want to ruin Ohio State's mojo, if nothing else. So you're gonna have every player on that field on the other side of the ball. They want to prove they can either play at Penn State or they can play at the other team that that wants them. And B, they're just out of just spite and anger, they're going to want to ruin the season. So like, I'm just saying it's not about like the point scored or whatever. It might just be about individual and individual, and that's what I need to see. And if we win all the matchups, I'll come on and be like, we're good, everything's fine. I just need to see it.
Yeah, and I do understand, but we'll move off of Ohio State because we could talk about Ohio State for the next 5 hours if you let us.
They are the number 1 team in the country. It's not irrelevant.
Right. I mean, 1, it's not irrelevant. 2, we're both Ohio State fans, and I'm going to talk Ohio State on the show regardless. But I don't want to spend too much time because there were a bunch of other games. Now, I'm not going to act like I watched every minute of this Ole Miss Georgia game. I think I would be unfair to say that I did because Ohio State was playing Wisconsin at the same time. Now, I did watch more than I planned of the Ole Miss Georgia game because it was such a good football game that you had to turn it on once you knew. I mean, you knew early, you knew Ohio State was going to take care of business. You're just watching it because it's your team at that point. Just the excitement of seeing what your team can do is why I continue to flip back to the Ohio State game. But by about the middle of the second quarter, I was more committed to watching the Ole Miss Georgia game. Once I seen that it's set up to be a shootout, and if they come out firing in the second half as well, that we're going to have a down to the wire, a crazy ending game. And I think we did. In a sense, like Ole Miss until the final 7 minutes looked like they were going to be able to hang on and win the game. But that's why 60 minutes are played, and that's why it didn't end at minute 53. And that's why there were still 7 minutes on the clock, and Georgia kept fighting and clawing and basically dominated the final 7 minutes to the point where it had Ole Miss playing desperation football. You thought that Ole Miss was going to put Georgia in a position where they were going to have to finish the game on some heroic stuff, playing desperation football. And instead, in those final 7 minutes, it flipped to the point Georgia took control of the game, and it was Ole Miss playing back against the wall, having to take chances, having to go for it on 4th down, and having to convert on 4th down or decide whether to punt. Do we have enough time to play defense and put all the pressure on defense for the final 7 minutes? So good job by Kirby Smart and Georgia for being able to pull it out. This is one of those games where everybody's looking at Lane. Some people are looking at Lane like, once again, Lane loses these type of games, but he also beat Georgia last year, so it's not like He hasn't beat Kirby Smart. Just remember, he did beat him last year, to be fair. And he beat him at home. This time it was on the road at Georgia. It was a tough ask. This Georgia team is good. This Ole Miss team is pretty good. I still think we saw two pretty good teams and two playoff type teams going against each other. One had to win, one had to lose. When two teams like that play, I think Georgia's just a little bit better than Ole Miss, whether it's because Kirby Smart is just a better coach than Lane Kiffin, whether it's just they got the right type of athletes, whether it's just a little bit tougher, whatever it is. I just think they're a step better than Ole Miss, and you have to play 60 hard minutes in order to beat Georgia.
We talked about it.
53.
We talked about it earlier in the show. It came down to quarterback. It was Gunnar Stockton's best game of the season. He was pretty good against Tennessee. He was great in this game, made the right decisions. He got it done with his feet, everything. And Chambliss just wasn't, I don't even say quite ready for the moment, but just wasn't quite up to it. Not that the kids had a great year stepping in and all these things, but like the difference was one of the schools had just a better quarterback. And, that's just what we keep talking about. And if you tell me Lane Kiffin, goes out last year and gets one of the, gets Beck. If he has Carson Beck, I think he wins the game. So I think it's that close with these teams. But I'm totally impressed with Georgia because at some point you got to be like, you're down. And that's 2 weeks in a row that they looked beat and came back and beat a good team. So that's what I'm impressed with them. If they stay healthy, Georgia this second is my favorite to win it, only because I've seen them do it. That could change. It could change based on venue, change based on a lot of things. It's going to change in 2 weeks after I see Ohio State play Penn State. But as of right now, I have them as they shouldn't be ranked number one, but I'm saying I have them as like if the tournament started tomorrow. That's what I'm saying. I think Georgia's the most ready. Georgia and Alabama are the most ready just because they've been through it. But that's going to wear on your body. They're going to have injuries. By the end of the season, these two teams aren't going to be on all cylinders. We know this about the SEC and Big Ten football.
Right, and I don't disagree. And to move on to the night game, like the conversation about this team that I think should be had is this team the biggest threat to Ohio State as far as arguably being the best team in the country? And that's Alabama. I know we talk about.
I thought you were going to say Notre Dame, actually.
No.
Notre Dame's
they look really good. I understand that, but they still. I'm not. This Alabama team, Jeff.
Yeah, they're awesome.
They look like. I mean, people were ready to fire Kalen DeBoer. It was time to move on. We need Nick Saban back after week one. After a loss to Florida State, which was a Florida State team.
Can you imagine delusional fans like that trying to get their coach fired with a good team?
But after week one. And so it was all panic mode, and their bounce back game was after play against Louisiana Monroe. They won 73-0. That wasn't going to convince anybody that they were good. Then they had Wisconsin come into Tuscaloosa early enough that we didn't know how bad Wisconsin was. They won 38-14. Okay, this team, you started to look at the good things that they did in that game as there's a shot, but then we come to find out like this Wisconsin team is all-time bad. And they just go on a run where they have to prove themselves by beating Georgia. They beat Georgia, turn around and have to defend themselves and how good they are versus a team that's a Cinderella type of team with the moxie of a quarterback and Vanderbilt and Diego Pavia, and they put them in their place and they win 30-14. Then they have to go on the road. Eli Drinkwitz and, him and his magical run at Missouri and this team being very viable, beat them. Yeah, it was by 3, but still a win is a win, especially in this era. And then we host Tennessee and we bring Tennessee into Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And Tennessee has had a lot of close games. And they're a team that was 1 or 2 plays away from beating a Georgia team that we beat. And Tennessee is going to have an opportunity to come into our house. And we just put them away by 17. Really, after the first quarter, never looked like we were going to lose this game. We've pretty much, Alabama has pretty much been dominant since the loss to Florida State. And when you look at, even if you overrate some of the teams, even if we don't think Vanderbilt is that great, Vanderbilt just beat LSU. Even if we don't think Missouri is that great, like they're going to play Vanderbilt this weekend, but they're still a team that's ranked. They're in the SEC and they're still alive as far as having an opportunity to win the SEC. So they're still in national relevance and in conversation, and they have a very good head coach. This Tennessee team is still pretty good. We know what they are. And they dominated them. So they went on a run of just flat out dominating everybody since the Florida State loss. And nobody's really focused on that. Like Miami losing Friday night. I think so now we're looking like, because Miami being the number 2 team in the country and the defense looking amazing, we lost sight of the fact Kalen DeBoer bounced back better than anybody after a loss. And the luck for him was probably the best thing for Kalen DeBoer in Alabama was the fact that they lost the first game of the season because they got that taste out of their mouth. They've beaten teams that are good. They've beaten a Georgia team that we think is a playoff team. They've beaten a Tennessee team that I think could sneak in, look like they could sneak into the playoffs. I think this Vanderbilt team maybe still a little overhyped. I think part of them beating LSU was LSU being overhyped, but at the same time, they still won that game. This is a team that's 6-1 going into a matchup against Missouri. Missouri in the same thing, ended up skating by against Auburn, but that seems like all the good teams have just skated by against Auburn in the SEC. So it's not a knock on them for being in a dogfight against Auburn on the road. This Alabama team, it doesn't seem like they're getting enough love, which is a surprise. Because if this was like a Nick Saban-led Alabama team, they're number one in the country on the AP poll this week for everything they've done the past 6 weeks, everything they've done since losing to Florida State. And I'm just trying to give them their credit because people were really ready to gather the troops, light the fires, bring the pitchforks, and run Kalen DeBoer out of Tuscaloosa. And since then, he's just turned Alabama into the biggest threat to Ohio State.
And I think all it is just fatigue. I think that everybody sees it. It's just, as far as what you hear in the media and stuff, it's just not fun to talk about as good as they are. I think that's all it is. I think it's just more fun to talk about. Honestly, it's just more fun for everybody to talk about Indiana right now, talk about Vanderbilt. That's all it is. I don't think it's disrespect. I think that's just what people want to hear is like, they want to hear about Diego Pavia. They don't want to hear about Simpson, all these things, because they know, and this is because we talk about the comparisons to the NFL all the time. They know what's coming. So they know we're going to have 2 weeks of talking about Alabama versus Ohio State or whoever they play. They know that if Alabama wins a game, so they know we've got a month of talking about Alabama. So right now is the time to build up these other programs. Like right now, they're hoping so bad that Indiana loses just for something to talk about. They're hoping so bad that Vanderbilt loses or wins just for something to talk about. So I think Alabama, like teams, they don't really talk about Ohio State much. If you watch the highlights after the games, they're like, Ohio State rolled again, let's move on. And that's fine because we know how much they're going to talk about it in about 2 weeks and then in 3 weeks. So I think that's all it is right now. But Alabama looks great. I'll tell you what's scary. I'm not saying Alabama can't win it this year. Next year, Alabama, it could be a juggernaut. Like if they keep everybody together with quarterback and Ryan Williams and all these, like, holy smokes, they could be really good next year, but they're good this year. I'm not saying they can't win it. It's going to be cool about Alabama. 4-0 in the SEC. They got a really good shot of playing for the title. Two things about it. The loss column is going to be interesting this year, whether people ignore the Florida State loss or whether they don't. That's going to be interesting because I'm at the point now to where I could just erase that Florida State loss and not even worry about it with Alabama. I would hate to see them for some reason not get a shot in the playoffs because of that stupid loss, because this team is I don't think that's going to happen, but I'm saying it'll be interesting to see. But more than likely, they're going to get a shot at the SEC title. It's going to be, A&M. It's going to be Georgia. Like that game, I think there's a chance that game can matter. I don't think the Big Ten championship game is going to matter this year. I think it's going to be a shame that they have to play it just like last year. This year, I think the SEC championship game, somebody's getting eliminated. So it's pretty cool how it's setting up, thanks to Alabama. And they're definitely, they've definitely proven it. They can win in any different way against anybody. They've beaten enough good teams, and I'm sold. Like I'm in. Georgia and Alabama, they're in. They're good enough to win a title.
So how much are you sold on the other SEC team that's sitting there with not a single loss in Texas A&M? Marcel Reed at Texas A&M continue to answer questions. I know it was a close game against Arkansas, but Arkansas's played everybody close. They played close.
Pretty good.
Yeah, it's one of those teams where they're not good enough to win, but they're good enough to have you on the edge of your seat for 4 quarters. And if you slip up, they could mess around and beat you. But if you're going to be a good team like Texas, if you're going to be a good team like you say we are, then a team like Arkansas take you down to the brink, you're going to find a way to win. And that's what Texas A&M did. Offensively, they're able to score a lot of points, and they've done it against good teams. It's not like they just lit up Arkansas in a bad defense against Arkansas, and that was it. They're able to put up points. They put up points on this Notre Dame team, and a lot of people think very highly of this Notre Dame team after the first 2 weeks of the season, but Texas A&M was part of the reason why Notre Dame has 2 losses at this point in the season. This team is undefeated and just constantly winning. I don't know if you don't take A&M serious right now, then when is the game that you would look at and you're like, that's where I know A&M is for real. Now they have a few of those coming up, but how many games do they have to
I
win?
think
What
it's
games is it they got
honestly,
to say,
honestly,
yep, they're for real.
Honestly, I think it's once they get down to like Texas, just because everybody's waiting for the upset and looking at the loss column. But I think once they get past LSU, which I think they easily will, once they get past, I mean, everybody's going to say it. This is what we talk about the helmet sticker. Everybody's going to say, "Ooh, you got to go into Death Valley and win." And Mo Murphy's going to say, "If you're as good as we think, as good as you're supposed to be, that's not a problem." And so if they get through Death Valley, then that's when we'll really start talking about it. Missouri, obviously upset. South Carolina, I don't see that. So I said it, I think after like week 4, after they beat, or maybe week 2, I guess, after they beat Notre Dame, I said A&M's in. They got the best schedule. They got the clearest path. They got a really good team. So I think A&M's in the playoffs. I think they're really good. I also think, just to kick back a little bit as an Ohio State fan, if Ohio State beats Arkansas by 3, we're having different conversations. But I know it's a standard thing. I know it's an expectations thing, but I just want to point out there that we automatically say, man, Arkansas is pretty good. If Arkansas can stay within 3 of Ohio State, then I'd be sick in my stomach. That's all I'm going to say. So I'm not going to stamp Texas A&M as great just yet. I need, if they just go whoop, here's what Texas A&M, just go whoop LSU and be done with this. And solidify your rankings, solidify who we think you are, and then we can start talking about the rest of the season. But they're very good, and they're going to be in the playoffs.
Yeah, because this is a team that could be playing for an SEC championship. Like you said, this is a team that could be matching up against Georgia, or could be matching up against Alabama, especially if they handle business down to the Texas game. Like, they kind of control their own destiny. I think they're probably going to be a favorite in every game from here on out, and they'll just be a team that we have on upset alert. They might be the consistent team that we're waiting on to get upset, and if they just keep scratching out victories, we'll just keep putting them on the list until either A, we're right, or B, they make it undefeated to the Texas game, and then all eyes are on A&M versus Texas, depending on how Texas fares out for the rest of the game, because they had their close call against Kentucky on the road. But in Texas's defense, is we've seen Kentucky do this to a bunch of good teams in the SEC for years. Like,
you might have Ole Miss last year.
Yeah, you might have national championship aspirations or whatever, but when you have to come into Lexington and play football, it's going to be a dirty, grimy, low scoring. We're just going to take you out of your element. You're not going to be able to play your type of football, but because you have the better athletes, because you have the better talent, you'll probably find a way to win. And that's why usually they don't upset the Alabamas like that, or upset necessarily the Texases, but they take them down to the brink. And that's what they did with Texas. We had Utah, BYU. I don't know how much, of that game you paid attention to. I don't know how much
just the score
game mattered in the grand scheme of things. BYU is a good team. They're viable in the Big 12. I think that mattered for BYU for the simple fact, like, Texas Tech lost yesterday. I think that's what made that BYU win a lot more viable, is because Texas Tech lost yesterday, and Texas Tech was almost looking like the team that was untouchable in the Big 10. And in the Big 12, I apologize. And they were just going to run their way through the Big 12 and secure their spot in the playoff. And then they lose to Sam Levin in Arizona State. And now they look vulnerable. And so now you're going to look down the list of the rest of their games, and they can be had. They play Kansas State, not a good team. But I think the Big 12, BYU plays Texas Tech in 3 weeks on November 8th. So that game is going to tell us everything we need to know but that could also turn around and be a rematch. Like, Texas Tech could beat BYU at home, and then they turn around and have to play each other in the Big 12 championship. Yeah. So, but BYU being undefeated at this point, I think BYU sitting pretty at number 11.
This is the first one I'll be negative on. I think BYU doesn't make it. They got Iowa State, they got Texas Tech, they got TCU, they got Cincinnati, they got UCF even. I think they're losing 2 games, and I think honestly, the team that's kind of sneaking back there, and definitely nobody's talking about it, is right here in my home state. I think Cincinnati's lurking. Like, I think they're like, ooh, we can accidentally, make some noise here, ruin somebody's season, and all these things. So something about, but you know what? Like you said, teams like BYU, different than Ohio State. All BYU needs to do is win. Nobody's going to be critical on any way they win, who they win against, none of that, because they're not at the standard, that we hold the Buckeyes or Alabama or any of these other teams. Like BYU, man, just win. And they're doing a great job, but so it's going to be interesting. Texas Tech, terrible loss. Honestly, just a terrible loss. You can't do that and put yourself in that position when you had everything out in front of you. Now you got BYU and Cincinnati undefeated in the Big 12. We don't know how it's going to go, but they play each other next to the last week of the season. So shout out to Cincinnati for hanging together. I can't stand them when they play the Buckeyes, but other than that, it's cool.
Yeah, and with Memphis losing yesterday to UAB on the road, that was a big deal. USF looks like they look real viable as far as being the G5 team, being the representative. I think that would be good.
And they got that big win on them.
Yeah, and then watch out. Here's my thing is USF, as they're lurking, this could be a tryout for Alex Golesh to get one of these P5 jobs. Not just Florida, not just Penn State. You got Virginia Tech that's open. You got UCLA that's open. You might have some other jobs that are going to open because some other coaches are going to take some of these other jobs, and they're probably going to come from within the Power Five. So you don't know what this coaching carousel could turn around. But a guy like Alex Golesh, like if he continues to win and he puts USF in a playoff spot, and let's say they win a playoff game, like that might be a $4 or $5 million, raise for Alex Golesh as far as what type of money he could demand as a Power Five coach. And that might raise a lot of programs' eyes. So when you think about a USF, maybe he's 100% happy there, and maybe he has no plans of leaving USF. But there's a lot of programs looking for a head coach that have a lot more resources and a lot more money to put into their program, and they're willing to put into their coaching staff than USF would be able to. We do know that. And if they could go the route of a G5 guy that built the program into winning, took them to the playoffs, and so now we think he can come this way and we give him all the resources, he can do the same thing over here. Like an Alex Golesh is like, it's a tryout with this talented USF team every week. And I think if he gets them to the big stage, it gets them to the playoff and be the G5 representative, they're looking to upset somebody. And like I said, I think that's the difference of $3, $4, $5 million a year.
And I can see, and I can see South Florida, like if we're talking about one of these at-large bids being, right now, who knows who it could be in the Big Ten? It could be, it could be UCLA. Like, we don't know. Like, speaking of UCLA, that dude might keep his job. But just real quick on South Florida before we get out of here, they got Memphis, UTSA, Navy, UAB, Rice. How would you love to be a Buckeye fan and have that schedule? No, with all due disrespect, like, great for having a G5 spot available, but that's sad. But hey, good for them, man. They ought to be able to run the table, and they ought to be in there, and they're going to get a shot to ruin somebody's day, somebody's year.
And like I said, that could be a huge tryout and spotlight on a future head coaching opportunity for Alex Golesh, whether it be in this coaching carousel cycle, which I think would make more sense to leave now.
Well, can they let him go to the playoffs and not hire him? Can a team wait that long? That's the question. Can they wait till after the playoff games and the end of January to hire a coach? That's the question about this. Or will he have to leave? He might have to leave. We might see the first coach to leave a playoff team. I'm just saying.
Or announce basically. Yeah. And that would be one of those situations where it becomes weird. And that would be where that's what happens when you have all these.
You can't miss that first portal in January. And you can't.
Yeah, they got rid of the second portal, if I'm not mistaken. So the only way you could leave in that second time is if a head coach leaves or something like that. It has to be a special circumstance. So that portal is the important time to stack up your roster next year going into spring practice. So we will see, because there are a bunch of head coaching jobs open. There might be a few more opening up at the end of the season.
There's 3 top 20 head coaching jobs open already. Wow,
and you're already
assuming Florida State.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Then you're already talking about a couple other coaches at prominent programs that could be on the hot seat where they make
LSU
here. Yeah, LSU and I think the conversation still is hot. Everybody's still not all the way in on Sherrone Moore being the long-term answer as the head coach at Michigan. Now, I know after losing to USC, the noise don't be surprised if they were to lose the next one. Now, they were able to dominate Washington. And I'm not saying Sherrone Moore is going to be like Billy Napier to Michigan, but he might be one of those guys where he's never good enough. But just every time you look to get rid of him, like, he wins those games where you doubt him. Like, after getting dominated by USC, you kind of thought they might lose against Washington, but if you want to salvage the season and stay alive, you have to win this game. And that's what they did, and that's what they were able to do. But
he's going to get another year with Underwood regardless. Like, there's nothing that can.
Yeah, and I think Underwood,
they're not getting beat by unexpectedly. The only team that might beat them is Ohio State. How they might make the playoffs, like. Michigan's, they're way better than people think. Everybody always wants to bury Michigan. And I said, this was my warning for years. All these people grew up on Ohio State thumping Michigan, and they're calling Michigan irrelevant with all these junk coaches. This ain't what they got now. They got solid players. They got NFL players, and they got a superstar at quarterback. Like Michigan's a good team, like a legit good team, and he gets better every week. You know, I mean, we're going to sit here and talk about how Julian Sayin gets better and like how he's doing great. Yeah, Underwood's doing it, and he runs. I'm just saying, like, I think they're way better than people think they are.
Yeah, and I guess, I don't know why. I mean, why we would write off Michigan. You know why we could care less about what they got going on until the game at the end of the year. But Jeff, I do appreciate you for jumping on. I appreciate you for giving me a little over an hour of your time to talk college football. There's still 1,000 things we could have covered. We could have went for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours talking everything college football, but we gave you guys a good week 8 recap. We'll go ahead and preview week 9 later on. Ohio State is on a bye week. So this is going to be one of those fun little Saturdays where I get to watch the college football chaos. Zero stress. I'm not worried about Ohio State is entering their bye week number 1. They're not going to lose. They're not going to have a close game. Nothing about Ohio State is probably going to pull them from number 1. I don't think Indiana has a big time game that'll have them jump to number 1 while Ohio State sits and rests.
Oh no, they want Ohio State. They want Ohio State number 1 as long as they can, because if they get upset, they want to be able to talk about it. Trust me, Ohio State's entrenched at number 1 until they lose. Nothing they could do, because the media would love Ohio State to lose.
Yeah, and I'm sure they would love for that to happen and come into fruition off of their bye week. But like I said, Jeff, I appreciate everybody. I appreciate you for jumping on the show. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. I appreciate everybody for listening. We will catch you later in the week and next week. Also, the NBA season tips off on Tuesday. Basketball season for high school basketball starts officially on Wednesday. That means the basketball content will be coming in full force over the next few months at the Coach Mo Murphy podcast. So we've been focusing a lot on college football, not really much on the NFL, kind of waiting until it gets a little more entertaining. I've been watching the NFL, my Cowboys being down, but we're back all in on basketball, things from a coaching perspective, and also talking NBA and college basketball. Everything will be basketball and college football from here on out. But I appreciate everybody for tuning in. I appreciate everybody for listening. We will catch you on the next episode of the Coach Mo Murphy podcast. Peace.